everyone, and welcome back to the Political Power Hour. My name is Devin, and today I have a guest who is also a fellow student. And if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Okay, so yeah, I'm Jackson Sinsel. I'm a political science major here at Fort Hays with a minor in psych. Um, Involved with the Honors College. That's about it.
Nice. And SGA, if
Yeah.
I'm not
Yep.
mistaken. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. So yeah, some interest there in both have some interest there in political science. And today, just wanted to talk about, like I always do, just talk about like past and present politically charged issues, and just let it be known that you can have a conversation about stuff that of course, feel strongly about. Um, of course, feeling strongly about it is not the issue. It's just sometimes how people conduct a conversation. And today we're going to be talking about a uh, uh, somewhat like has always been somewhat of a hot button issue, and that is gun control. And when I originally wrote the notes for this, what was going on was the uh, like Kyle Rittenhouse trial, and that video sparking up a bunch of controversies and stuff like that. Um, so that's kind of what kind of got me inspired to talk about um, gun control, dive into it more, and just find out truths, myths, and what I actually think about the topic. Uh, would you kind of like go into maybe like what your position is on the subject?
Yeah, totally. So I kind of see gun control as almost a issue that can't be solved totally, but we can kind of minimize the issues we've been having recently. Obviously, there's been some very charged issues based on what's been going on just in media and everything. And I'm a firm believer that we can possibly come up with some new ways to deal with it that aren't politically charged. So,
Oh, nice, interesting. Just to sort of ask, like, what do you think some of those ideas could possibly be?
so my ideas would be something like a like stricter, probably stricter like background checks and stuff like that. I don't have like a full like written out like list of like what the ideas would be, but like obviously there's steps we could take to minimize like the like mass shootings we've had and things like that that like make it to the top of our media.
Sure.
Like, so
That's almost becoming uh it's obviously tragic, but it's unfortunate. Like you see a mass shooting on the news, and you're like, "Oh, another one? Okay."
yeah.
Is it it's just kind of unfortunately like somewhat of a weekly or daily thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, total agreement there that it's obviously like a tragedy that's happening. Um, if I'm being honest, I am pretty much like pro gun, pro Second Amendment. But always wanting to like understand like anybody who like thinks you know differently than me. So like if I can hear that and be like, oh well, maybe my previous idea was like not as good. Um, um, and yeah, I believe that sort of stems for me at least like just the right to self preservation.
Mhm.
Um, the domestic or foreign. It's it's a it's a right that definitely is talked about quite a bit. Sometimes I definitely think a right that's talked about more than the other amendments, but it's definitely I guess important for that reason because if the First Amendment fails, then the Second Amendment is sort of the backup. I feel anyway.
Yeah, totally. I think it's just the main reason the Second Amendment is talked about so much is it's just like all the other amendments obviously have their own contextual or conceptual beliefs, but like it's just I was like I think we can all agree like freedom of speech is everyone loves being able to say what they can, but guns, some people don't feel
Sure.
like that people that don't know about what like have never owned a firearm or
Yeah.
used them, they just don't know what's going on in that realm, and they kind of can see the Second Amendment as type of something that isn't good for them or their I don't know whoever they align with in terms of like political parties or like groups of individuals. So
No doubt. No, that's definitely something that I should acknowledge too. Is when you know look at the inanimate object, like that is a gun. Yeah, like you said, people who are not familiar with it, uh, and just see stuff on the news, um, can maybe like project like negative connotations to it. I'm on the other side of that coin too. Like I'm guilty of it. Like maybe I project like some positive connotations, on the object, and it's just like you said, it kind of depends on where you were, where you grew up, like kind of seeing, like putting your own thoughts and emotions like into the object. Um. But yeah, it's definitely like an issue that like I see the other side and I'm like, what are you guys talking about? Like I don't think you're insane that you want to like stop people from dying. Like I obviously want that too, and I'm on the other side. It's just like with everything, it's just how we go about solving that issue is this we have different ideas, I suppose.
totally.
Yeah. And I guess the kind of the first deal I'll go into here is just kind of like sort of myths about like the pro gun side, I suppose. It's like the first one that I hear quite a bit is like it's just about hunting. Like people are like you don't need this gun for hunting. It's like, well, it's not about just hunting. um, and also I feel too that is that it's also true that there are other objects that can somewhat be like just as deadly or take as many lives like as like a mass shooting, because I'm not sure. That'd be a good thing to look up. Because I think I don't know if it's like, is it 5 people? I think to like for it to be classified as a mass shooting to like people die. I'm not sure.
I actually have no idea on that one.
How many?
I assume it's something like that. I mean, because then it obviously moves to a different classification. Because
Let's see. Any incident which at least 4 people are murdered with a gun or a firearm.
okay,
Gun or firearm, same thing. But yeah, so it's even lower. So it's a deal, right, where obviously more on the average in a like a public environment. If people are wanting to do harm, they'll probably use a firearm. But I can't remember the guy's case, but it was a court case where he represented himself, and he like ran into like a bunch of people with his car. I can't remember. I wish I could remember, or I can't remember the name, but he was a crazy guy. Like on the
and that, didn't something like that did that happen over in like France? There was an instance like that. I thought I heard of like a car, like maybe like a year or two
Yeah.
ago.
Maybe
Of
it's
like
the
a
same one.
Yeah, like a situation like that where they used a car to commit
Yeah.
that
Like they
like that type of crime.
and it's sort of the same deal, I suppose, where it's like an inanimate object that's obviously can be dangerous. Like,
Yeah,
drive
almost weaponized to an extent when they used it that way.
right. And like even on the average, I think driving is one of the most dangerous things that we do, like just daily.
Definitely.
But it's uh oh, sort of, but it's sort of another object that can be used to sort of commit harm, and so I think in that aspect, obviously guns can be much more effective, but it's not just the only object, I suppose. Like knives, like in
Yeah,
the UK and Canada,
they have
um,
severe issues with that.
they ban guns, and now people are just stabbing each other.
Yep.
And I think that's also like I could see that as a solid argument to have a gun as well. If somebody has a knife, well, I want a gun. um, and then like one that I heard too that was sort of silly is like nobody like needs like firearms. Just trust the police and let them do what they do.
I've heard that one too.
What do the police use to stop the crimes?
Guns. Yeah,
And
I think
obviously it's too late most of the time.
Yeah,
before the
definitely.
cops get there. And like the other thing too, I don't want to go so far and to say there should be no police. It's just only folks ourselves protecting each other, like Wild West style. Like obviously no. But if the case presents itself, like I can't remember that one shooting in Texas in the church. I think there was a guy that opened fired in a church, and a guy had a gun, and he killed the guy
ultimately
before.
stopped it. But
Yeah, and before he, well, I don't want to say because I don't know. I don't know if people died in that shooting or not, but there's still that prevention to more loss of life, and those are, definitely a few I've heard. Maybe like jumping like to the other side of things, I guess. Like, what are some myths that you've heard about, like sort of like I don't know how to describe it, like the gun control side or however you want to say it.
Yeah, I'll comment on like the last one with what did you say again? What was your last myth?
Just trust the police.
Okay,
just
trust the
let
police.
them handle it.
That's an interesting one because like we obviously have lots of laws with protecting yourself. Like you got your Second Amendment, obviously for that reason.
And well, even ones that are written, right, like the right to life and things like that. But yeah, there's right to privacy, right to all these things that
not explicitly written out in the Constitution, but it's just been like decided upon by like cases and stuff. That's like that's something you have a right to. Yeah.
What is it? That's the 10th Amendment, if I'm not wrong, or is it the 9th?
That's rights reserved to the states, but
so the 9th is ones that aren't. We have rights that aren't written explicitly. Yeah. But what did you want to say?
I guess mainly like the police thing. A lot of people use their weapons not just for protecting themselves though, too. Like, I mean, me and my family, we're pretty adamant about like hunting and stuff, and like, yes, like those weapons, like some of those weapons, like you see people have, those are like outrageous. Like you would never use those while you're like hunting, but like normal weapons, like just like rifles and stuff, that's completely normal for like a normal citizen to own if they wanted to go out and hunt. And I don't see an issue with that type of thing, I guess. But
and like something I think we can admit too that it's fun, right?
Yeah.
Like to hunt, it's just fun, and there are people who are have their reservations about that, which I sort of understand, but I also don't understand. But that's a different discussion.
Yep, definitely.
But I think that's a good, interesting point to dive into. It's the people who make that argument. I think you heard the term, right, weapon of war. especially used for like the AR-15.
Yep.
That like no citizen should have like a military grade weapon or something like that. And while I can see where they're coming from, at the same time, I think like you said too, it's a deal where if somebody also has a gun and you're trying to defend themselves from them, like I don't, well, anything doesn't even have to them have, they didn't even necessarily have to have a firearm on the opposition, whether it's like a knife or like a bat or any other thing. And the object that I want to defend myself, I want it to be like a landslide, right? Like I want it to be like an easy defense. Like I don't want it to be a struggle to defend. And I think that's probably the last like sort of misconception that I hear too. It's like the right wingers that want somebody to break into their house so they can shoot them and like get away with it. It's like I don't think the majority of like gun owners like want to kill somebody.
The majority of gun owners don't want to use their weapon even against someone ever. Like,
yeah.
If that problem were to arise, like obviously they're going to protect themselves, but not.
It's more it's more recreational.
Yeah.
Like I think like you were saying.
Majority of the people are using it for recreation or even like target shooting and stuff like that. Stuff where it's literally for fun. It's not for any other reason.
And which I don't know how, because
you're being careful. So
because ammo is like
expensive. It's gone up a lot recently.
My uncle said that like that's how they'll get us. It's like they don't take away the guns; they'll just make the ammo impossible to get. I was like, okay. But I think that's sort of a good segue into diving in like what kinds of gun control and like what kind of laws that we're talking about. And I think you touched on like the extensive background checks, and I'm pretty sure, I think it varies from state to state.
Yep.
So it might not be like a poor idea to get like a federal, like sort of some federal regulations, which I think there are for a few things, like a few.
I think there might be some certain like broad ones, but I would like most of them are reserved to the states, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah. So it like some federal regulations are just like requiring states to have background checks and to like meet the age requirement, 18 to 20 years old. Certain licenses you have to purchase individual firearms. Yeah. So, and I guess I can only really speak for Kansas, because that's the only state that I've sort of delved into. I can't really speak on like a federal level, but at least in Kansas, I mean, I'll be honest. I mean, I'm open to suggestions, no doubt, but I'll be honest. I don't know what like other laws you can sort of implement to like law-abiding citizens.
Yeah, I don't know of a ton, but like even just registering unregistered firearms could be a start, because like getting them actually registered under their owners. So like not almost like, obviously we don't want government overreach, but like there's a certain point where like it's safer for everyone if like they have that stuff registered. And it's even safer, I'm thinking of also like possible like regulations about like how you're storing your firearms, because like I know a lot of the issues like we've noticed recently has like arose from like people getting their hands on like a parent's or someone else's firearm and using them against others. And even like, I mean, some of them are just going out and buying them and then immediately after doing out like horrendous things.
Sure. I believe, if I'm not wrong, like there is a mental health check There's a waiting period. There's an age limit. Uh, you have to have a license. So with the license, you have to like pass a course. Um, so, and you know, in that aspect, I feel like there are kind of things like set up, and and then obviously like there's criminals will always, you know, bypass a
Yeah,
way
find a
or
way around them.
and so I guess like that's sort of my only thing, right? Is more laws kind of only affect like law-abiding citizens. I
Yeah.
was just curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I guess that is true, but like I'm just kind of like stuck on the idea of like we could store our firearms better cuz like I've like most of the stuff that I've like recently heard is like the I don't know like the person who commits the obviously the mass shooting, there was a couple instances where they got it from like their family home, like they found it, and like that's obviously not good because your firearms
Right.
should be kept in a way that
I
like
see.
not others could get into. Like,
Yeah, no doubt.
yeah. So
No, there's, and I don't think that's like a. I think that's a pretty big thing too with gun owners. Obviously, practice safety, no doubt. Like
mhm.
nobody, yeah, wants people who are just gonna let that thing, be wherever for kids to get or. I think. Well, some of the rules I've heard, I don't know if this is like a military thing or just like a hunter thing in general. Um, you've always heard to like don't look down the barrel.
Yeah,
If you're
obviously.
gonna point it at something, be prepared to fire because that's the only reason. You should be pointing it at somewhere. Um, even when you go, use like the right trigger finger, like have your finger on the outside of the guard
Mhm.
until you're absolutely ready to shoot. Just things like that. Yeah, no doubt. I'm for like more like I guess like gun education. I
Yeah,
suppose
I guess we do have some of that, but like I
more
don't.
definitely.
Yeah,
Well, it used to be in school, just
yeah.
like with driving. Like it used to be a thing that
Well,
kids can learn about.
I went to one when I was like, I think I was like 11 because I was getting ready to like shoot first year type
Mhm.
of thing, and like me and like a few of our like my friends and everybody we went to like I think it was like Grant maybe like a town in Nebraska a little bit away from where I lived, and we did like gun education, like whatever's it called. I don't know the actual.
It's like is it a training course
Yeah,
or
but we basically went through like obviously the do's and don'ts of like using a gun type thing. And
right?
like that's seems like common sense, but
Right.
it's definitely not. So
No. Um, and I think something you brought up too that was pretty interesting about the people who, um, like kind of commit these shootings. It's if we're being honest, it's young white males is like
mhm.
who commits the majority of these things. Um, why that is, I I have no idea. One thing I definitely know is I can't remember where. I wish I had the statistic pulled up. Um, so I'm not just just making stuff up, but I think it was like a majority of these shooters like didn't have a father figure.
Mhm.
Um, that's something definitely to be looked at. Is it's sort of maybe like not a gun, not a race problem. It's more of like possibly like just a problem that starts within the family, like a mental health thing or something like that.
Yep.
Um, it's I'm not sure if that's like the actual issue, but um, sort of my best guess. Um, I guess the next thing sort of we can dive into is like you obviously the thing you hear quite a bit about is like the offensive use of firearms, like where it comes to shootings and whatnot. But I don't think there's a whole lot to be said for like the defensive use of firearms, or like people defend themselves in a shooting or something like that, or like a shooting doesn't have to even occur. Like I imagine it's quite a bit, but I don't know. Where like someone who's going to shoplift sees a policeman with a gun and he goes, you know what? I think I'm not going to shoplift. Like I wonder just how many instances of that where a criminal sees a firearm and is like, well, I think I won't. I think I won't commit the crime.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah, defense. I mean, just quite simply using like a firearm in defense is not talked about enough because a lot of people carry them just in the occasion that something bad could happen to them. Like that type of stuff is very common.
Mhm.
Like I think we don't understand how common that is.
Mhm.
For like maybe people, maybe not people in like other areas, but like at least in the Midwest, there's a lot of people that conceal carry or open
Oh, yeah.
carry just for the defense of themselves
Well,
and sometimes even others. Like
yeah.
they're kind of looking out for other people too. So
Just in like when my dad was in high school, they'd have the rifles in the back of hanging up in the back of their trucks, like that they drove to high school, and it's like it's just I don't know if like it's just interesting how like time has evolved to where that's just not a thing anymore. And I don't know. I don't know if kind of thinking along those lines. It's definitely sad to think that people that need to like so many people need to think they need to or think they like feel the need to like conceal carry, because I don't know, there's probably like some potential issues with that, right, where it's like um you know is the solution just to make people think that everyone needs one.
yep.
I don't know. It could be the thing too, where it's like the reason we haven't nuked our, countries haven't nuked each other's because we'll all die. It's like uh, the equal thing where it's like, well, if we both know we have guns, then probably don't want to shoot each other.
Yeah.
But yeah, not too sure on like sort of that point. But I think the number was somewhere around like 500,000 to 3 million defensive uses of firearms a year, and that's compared. And this was 2020, so I don't know what it is for 2023. That was compared to 13,625 deaths or suicides. So like, yeah, it's really not even close. It's just it's just trauma is something that can be exploited on the news for every time that it happens. But I was kind of just curious about any other myths or any other thoughts that you had while we were talking here.
Not that I can really think of right now. I mean, I've been kind of thinking, but I don't know of a ton. Maybe a myth that like most people assume, like there's some, maybe not most people, but there's an assumption out there that a lot of people own like military grade weapons, and that's just not the case. Like,
Yeah.
a lot of people typically own like their, just regular like 20 gauge, 12 gauge type thing for like shooting ducks and stuff like that. And then they own like their rifle for going out and hunting. Like that's not.
I'd say it's at least in my experience, I think where it varies, right, is like within pistols or like handguns. I think that's where I see the most variation, at least where I'm from. But yeah, as far as like long rifles and stuff like that, I don't see except for like really one person I know, like that has an AR. Like that's really about it.
Yep.
But yeah, I don't. That'd be a good thing to dive into. It's like how many people own like assault. I really don't like the term assault rifle because
Yeah.
like anything can be like
The parameters for it to be considered that is weird.
like
so.
assault. Like anything can assault you. Like
Yeah.
assault knife, assault. I think I sort of it's just I don't know. It's probably just like a little bit which both sides are guilty of, just a little bit of fear mongering, probably.
Mm-hmm.
Just using the right like trigger words.
Yeah, right terminology can for whatever side can really change somebody's beliefs on something.
Oh, for sure. That's definitely a podcast I wanted to do too. Is just like dive into like propaganda and like speech and stuff.
And type of like trigger words type of thing. Yep. And assault rifle is definitely a trigger word in media.
Oh yeah, because I think you can. Maybe that's one of the things too. Is you can be having a conversation, and if either side uses enough of like the trigger words, then like it can sort of heat up the conversation until it like devolves into like a screaming match.
Yep.
So I guess another common question I've sort of seen and heard is like why use a gun? Like what's the justification? And I think we've sort of gotten into that fairly well. It's just, defending myself, family, property. And then another one I've heard quite a bit is like, I think the last one I'll probably go into here is like the reinterpret the Second Amendment for like the present day, I suppose. And I think you might agree that I don't know if those people realize, but the Constitution like is a living document. Like it's it has been since it was created, and it is now, and forever will be until we're all gone.
Yeah, that's why the framers made it that way, so we could adjust as need be, which obviously hasn't happened a lot.
Right, only
historically.
27 amendments. Yeah, which is
But
well, I can't remember. Was it Jefferson that said every 19 years or like every generation they should like redo a constitution?
Oh, I hope not.
I'm not sure who said that.
Yeah, but I don't know. Typically, I mean, we've only been able to get like the most recent one was like the raising of like salaries until like after they're out of office type of thing. Like I don't know the exact wording, but like,
right.
That's like the only one we've gotten, and that's just because it's not partisan. Like no one's gonna vote against that. Basically,
right? Only they would like it. We get more money.
Just to wait until afterwards.
No, it's.
But there's even been like talks of like other amendments, but like they never come to fruition. Almost, it's like a kind of a.
There are so many, like that have been written up, and some of them that are just. Some of them like I don't know if you ever heard like the guy Mr. Beat on YouTube. No. He does a lot of pretty cool history videos, and he has a video talking about proposed amendments, and a lot of them are really good ideas.
Yeah,
it's just getting that vote.
Which is very, very tough.
And then also how practically they would be implemented. It's the same deal, right? Where it's whether it's issues or whether it's like healthcare, universal healthcare, college, guns, speech. It's like I think a lot of people are kind of like, for example, like on the gun thing, me and like someone like across the aisle, we obviously both want people to stop dying, and it's like lose the chaos. It's just we have like different ways to approach it, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I guess that those different approaches are kind of where we find ourselves not really knowing what the next step is if we want to fix these problems. Because obviously there's a lot of talk that something needs to change, but we're not quite sure what that is.
Sure.
Like what that is to like make it so both sides can actually agree upon something, which
Sure.
doesn't happen very often, especially with like really polarizing issues.
And it's tough, right? Because like in a lot of situations, especially this one, while we bicker, people die every day.
Exactly.
It was Thomas Jefferson that said every generation should rewrite its constitution. Which
Okay.
thankfully that
If that happened, we would have some very bad deliberation among our
'Cause
Congress.
I think that's sort of the genius, right, of the Constitution. That like it's a stable, like unifying document.
Yeah.
Because
the moment that's gone,
well, a little bit of a side tangent. Like as far as like Americans, there's not really anything that we're unified on anymore.
Yep.
Except for like being American, which is like super vague.
Yeah, vague in its terminology. What does that even mean?
Yeah.
We live here? What?
We have the same values? Well, no, not really. Were we all born here? No, not really. So it can mean sort of just about really anything, I suppose. Well, not really anything, but yeah, you get what I mean.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's so yeah. Going back to reinterpreting, because like you heard right that it was written for like muskets and stuff like that. I don't think people give enough credit to like the revolutionary like firearms and stuff, because it's some of the weaponry was a little more advanced than people give it credit for. Like I'm pretty sure I found that there was a primitive like type of grenade like during that war.
Oh wow.
And then I've also made the joke too, where it's like, oh, you want us to use the weapons they had back then? Okay, I'll take a cannon. Like, but it's there. It wasn't just muskets.
Well, they had to have known that they were going to evolve.
Right.
Everything that like is made obviously gets better, and like them writing the
Oh, yeah.
Constitution, they definitely were like, well, obviously
Something-
it's going to happen. So
Well, they talk about like the U.S. like a U.S. type of U.S. postal system, I think, in the Constitution, and that really wasn't a thing yet. So it's something that they predict. In some things
they were thinking ahead in a
Yeah.
lot of those things, like even like reserving rights for the states. That wasn't like they were just making the Constitution. They had no idea what they were going to create with that. And I mean, they probably were like theorizing what was going to happen, which obviously we now have state governments, like stuff like that came out of that. But
right.
it's just an interesting. They definitely were thinking into like ahead of what was going to happen with those things, like especially the Second Amendment, I would think.
And there are, of course, some things for as bright, and those guys really were. People don't, I think, give them enough credit sometimes either. Just calling them just like dumb hillbilly farmers. Why should we listen to them? It's like those guys were actually like fairly like intelligent. Like they had read up on Aristotle, Plato, Locke. They saw what's going on in Europe with the I think the Age of Enlightenment is what it was called, and something like that. And they saw these things, and they came across like an idea to self-govern, which never was a thing until that point. But with all that genius that they couldn't have predicted something like the internet. There's no way you can predict something like that. I would just find it so fun.
Beyond their comprehension at the time.
I would love to explain it to them. Like, yeah, we send a message through the air. like it's invisible, and now they think it's like witchcraft. Um, but I think they understood like the importance of obviously the amendments. Why else would they have written it down? Yeah, and especially, and there's definitely something to be said for all of them. But just today talking about the Second Amendment, people, we know, right, that what did they just get done doing? Fighting a totalitarian government.
Yep.
Um,
They didn't
So-
want that type of thing to happen
Right.
again.
So it's a thing, right, that it's the same implication here. That's why we have it for enemies, foreign and domestic. Excuse me. And I think I know a response I've heard quite a bit is, "Oh, you're gonna take on the United States military." Well, if I'm not mistaken, members of the military have to swear an oath to the Constitution
Yep.
and defend it and its people. So I would at least hope that people of the military would say, "Hey, what are we doing here? If we would ever become too totalitarian." But I think I don't know. I think that's a bit of an outlandish deal. Because as messed up as the system is, that I think the checks and powers like keep it fairly stable, I suppose. Well, I suppose there's an argument to be made that the president has gone way overboard in what his original duties were, but
Yeah, well, that's even changed just historically. Like, the powers of the president has been changed by every president prior.
oh yeah,
Like, before, it was just kind of oh, yeah, you're the president, you have these set out powers, and now they're like, well, that's kind of a borderline, you have that, kind of not. But there's, like, a lot. It's opened a lot of doors. Like, there's
Sure.
a lot of things the president can do now that was not previously thought.
oh yeah. There's just a few things they stated out in the Constitution, and old George just kind of did some things, and then after he was done, people are like, "Yeah, it's a good idea.
We
We should
like
just
that."
do what he did." But yeah, no, it's a I think it's also, I don't know how realistic it is to like happen in the U.S., but I know like people have talking about like, I think it was the Australian gun buyback, where they took like, I think it was, they paid people for like thousands and thousands of guns, and they just like melted them all down. So like you have to, and I think it's like super strict to like even get hunting rifles over there now. And like I don't know how realistic, like I don't think that would ever like really come to pass here. Just
No,
like
definitely not.
how important it is to like just a majority of the states. But I guess sort of one of the last topics that I had was sort of one of a more like recent thing. Was you've probably heard of like the national red flag laws?
Not a ton. You could probably elaborate and I would know a little bit more, I guess.
Definitely go find it for yourself, because I don't want to like misrepresent it, but from what I understand, it's a deal where if like a citizen has a firearm, and like a neighbor or just somebody within like the town, just across the whole United States, if they suspect you of doing something criminal, they can contact the authorities, and cops would sometimes, like how they describe it is, cops could show up and just say, "You're acting a little suspicious. Give me that gun." And it's like, I don't know if it's actually been implemented anywhere,
I haven't heard of it anywhere yet.
but that would seem like a huge overstep.
yeah, kind of yet again another overreach that you
Yeah.
don't want to come in. So
Right. Absolutely. Uh,
I haven't heard a lot about that, quite frankly.
yeah, and I always encourage people to, like, if I tell you something, go look it up yourself, because like
Yeah,
I could be
definitely.
talking about, you know, something, totally different. Um, but as far as, I mean, yeah, that was really in general. I think people should talk like more about this, but there was really the Kyle Rittenhouse like trial that sort of got me like kind of hooked again, sort of like talking about like the Second Amendment.
Yep.
That was a pretty crazy trial. I don't think I only watched like the full video once. Did you ever see that video?
I never watched the actual trial. No. So
No, I mean like the video that like of like the shooting that he did.
oh, I did not watch that.
It's pretty wild. Like, I think, was it Colorado? I'm not sure. I don't know where he's from. It was a riot that was happening. I don't know what it was for. If it was like a I don't know if it was. I could be wrong, so I won't say it. But it was something just what?
I didn't say anything.
Oh,
sorry.
it's all good. But like peaceful protest
Yeah.
where like buildings are burning down. And I think for whatever reason, I don't know if he just wanted to go back there for family or whatnot, but he drove there. He drove back and he was like going around like, I don't know why he was. I think that'd be a good question to dive in, like why he was, walking around with his AR.
Yeah,
It's kind of like
like
during the riot.
that's
What are you doing?
concerning to start with. I don't know why it wasn't like brought up like, hey, something bad might happen here. Like
Yeah.
someone should have said something. They saw a guy with a
Yeah.
pretty powerful weapon. I don't know why you wouldn't bring that up, at least to some authority of
Yeah.
some sort. But
Yeah, and unfortunately, he wasn't the only one there
yeah,
that had weapons and was breaking stuff up. But I guess it goes down that some people were yelling at him, and then two guys chased him, and then shoved him down,
yeah,
and then he shot both of them, which they later turned out to be like lifelong criminals, which is like, well, that sort of checks out.
yeah. But still
Oh yeah, no,
not something that shouldn't. Like, I mean, obviously he was protecting himself, but no one ever wants anyone to.
it was just
so-
weird. Like, why did that situation have to
Yeah,
happen? Like,
go down
yeah,
like
why did
that.
he show up there? Like, that was the only lasting question I had. But yeah, that was just a good like example of like how people, just like ran with that story.
Yep.
Even like the United States president, like calling him a white supremacist, which is
A whole nother story.
wild. But yeah, I mean, that was just sort of the inciting like story I had to dive into it. I think for the most part, that's all I had to talk about guns and the Second Amendment. If you had any lasting comments or thoughts?
Not any like new things, but just the fact that like the issue can't be solved like we're gonna have to come to an agreement at some point, but I don't know how that's gonna actually happen. So
Yeah, it's not going to be just like one law and then
yeah, and then we're
everything's
done
fixed.
forever. It's like, oh, we fixed it. No,
Yeah,
that would never happen.
I don't know if it's just a deal, right, where there's got to be more conversation,
Mhm.
probably. There's got to be maybe more compromise. I don't know. I mean, that's what the nation's built on, baby. Is the Constitution. It's just a big compromise. It's I don't know. I don't know how I mean, I have my own thoughts and opinions, but on that, like, I honestly don't know how you fix things like that. Because if it is issues like, if you implement more laws, then, well, the criminals that already are not following laws, they're just not gonna continue not to follow them. If it is issues within like a home, if that's where it starts, I don't necessarily know how you can implement a law that sort of fixes that. Uh, it's just, yeah, an all around tough situation with no like clear cut answer
Yep,
is
definitely.
what we can say. But yeah, I think that's all we have for today. Definitely want to thank you for coming on. I know it's busy. Schedules are tough. Like that's definitely the hardest part for me on this is like just finding somebody that can talk about these things. So appreciate you coming on.
Yep, well, thank you.
Yeah. Well, we'll see you guys next time. Thanks for listening.